job to go in the wall, a hurl, a stick in a shinty bowl, the brick, the brack, the crack, and all. Let's call it an Irish pub. Caffrey's hard, Kilkenny, a pound, the Guinness, pint, a cabbage, crap, the I don't want to be paddy trapped. We'll call it an Irish pub. While I'll be fucked to swear.
Welcome to episode 1 of the Pubcast. My name is Brendan O'Neill, and I would normally be joined by Mike Cross and Michelle Riley. But in these first few episodes, we are revisiting our previous podcast, Boardwalk Breakdown. Basically, we're shutting down the Boardwalk Breakdown podcast and moving those 13 episodes over here so we can keep them alive and well in our archives. So, the Pubcast is our new podcast where we'll talk about all kinds of stuff and not be limited to only talking about Boardwalk Empire. And it will actually begin on episode 14. So just consider these first 13 episodes as bonus content. Sláinte. Welcome to the Boardwalk Breakdown podcast featuring Michelle Riley, Michael Cross, and me, Brendan O'Neill. Basically, we're fans of the HBO show Boardwalk Empire, providing some analysis and silly commentary. If you have any comments or questions, you can contact us on Twitter at Boardwalk Break. Enjoy the show. So I want to start before everything started.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I want to start like season 1 trailers, previews.
Okay.
When were you in with this show, and what drew you to it? I can say for sure the first commercial I saw for the HBO little teaser trailer of 30 seconds for the show, I was in to get from the first 5 seconds. You saw Jimmy Dormady with the gun in the lobby or something with a hat or not, I don't remember. Because I love the Prohibition era. I love that stuff. I've done some research about it. I have another project I'm working on that I want to talk about, but
really,
yeah,
I'm working on a book that I've been working on for 5 years, and I've never gotten any further than the first few pages of it.
Well, I think that whole Spats era, the Prohibition era, the Flappers. I mean, some of this stuff goes back to even college, having touch points on that. And,
I love it.
The beginning of it for me really became when I saw those trailers with Steve Buscemi, who happened to be one of my favorite actors at the time, still is, because he's typically playing an off the rails character in some way.
This is very straight for him.
It's straight, but this is a character who is off the rails.
Right.
There's no question. He's playing a straight man in a,
But I mean, for his
for his character.
And as soon as you see, I think for a lot of people who weren't in, when you see produced by Martin Scorsese,
okay, that's
you're
where
in.
I got to it.
You're in.
So I'm going to say that I actually probably read about Scorsese's working on this project and it costs $18 million and it's a TV show for HBO. So that was honestly
$18 million for the pilot.
For the episode.
Yeah, for the episode.
Yeah.
That's how I came to it because, pretty much you say Martin Scorsese and I'm in right there. Secondly, you've got Irish and you've got Mafia. Okay, number 2, I'm in right there. I will say, though, that all in all, the show is a lot darker and more ominous than I sort of expected from Scorsese. Yeah,
I thought it would be as bad, if not worse.
Yeah, I think
because that time was like that,
right? And I mean,
but it's also got you can totally do a happy whitewash 76 trombones version of this too.
But that's not Prohibition. That's the 20s.
Right, and that's not Scorsese either. That's the other thing. That's kind of the giveaway. I mean, maybe there was a thought there that, and I could see how you could get there. You're like, the Roaring 20s, or the Prohibition era, the
20s.
fun. But as soon as I see Scorsese and I've got Steve Buscemi,
I'm in.
I'm in. I know what's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of quality killing going on.
I'm in.
And I'm in. So I knew right away.
No shortage of that.
Yeah. Body count.
I mean, I don't know if there was something in between. There probably was, but this is effectively on the heels of Gangs from New York.
Which is another
classic
masterpiece
movie.
in my
Yeah,
opinion.
absolute masterpiece.
It's amazing. I'm like, and the Jimmy Dormady character kind of looks like Caprio a little bit. There's a little bit of, it kind of tied in visually, at least a little bit.
I never thought of that.
I loved it.
I did right away.
I never thought of that.
It's a Caprio
kind of a Leo
for TV.
lookalike. Yeah, right. He found the cheaper version of Leo.
I mean, I don't know if we want to jump the shark on that, but the Jimmy thing is like, to me, it seemed like they were building the show around him as much as Nucky from day one.
All right, so that's a point I want to talk about. Is, do you remember, I don't know what year it was, the first episode, the first season of ER.
Yes.
You were brought into the show through the eyes of Noah Wiley's character.
Right. It was like his first day of work or something like
The
that.
Yeah, it was the beginning of
The
his...
whole first couple seasons, you were effectively seeing things from his perspective as a newbie.
Oh, I
A
would.
new
I'm
resident,
glad you
right?
reminded
Named
me.
Carter.
Yeah, Carter.
I actually liked that show then.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody.
I fell
did. It
off the
was
wagon
like
after a season
Yeah.
3,
well,
4, 5.
you know,
Yeah.
talking about jump the shark. But anyway,
So he comes in as the
Definitely.
innocent, and you're sort of learning how the ER works through him because you're watching him do stuff. He's asleep in one of the surgery bays or whatever.
surgery base.
Bay 1.
Listen, I know this is a
You got a
shock.
gallbladder in Bay 1.
I am not a
A
doctor.
medical person.
I have no medical background, although I have some
Freelance.
Pharmaceuticals we
can talk about later.
Yeah.
Freelance.
Freelance. So I think Jimmy plays that role in the first few episodes of Boardwalk Empire. He's the innocent. He's just back from the war.
Yes.
He's coming back into Nucky's world. He doesn't know. He's mad that he's not involved. He's below.
Yeah, you're right. He's
below Mickey Doyle on the totem pole, and he's pissed off about it. He's just his driver now. He's the Noah Wiley, Carter, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
His name
he's standing in for you, I guess, the
Yeah.
the viewer,
Yeah.
right? So discovering what's happening in
when
the way
he
that-
finds out stuff, you find out stuff. Yeah. All right, so season 1. Let's jump into that.
Okay.
We're basically already into it. $18 million for the first episode. The trailer.
Crazy.
The,
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
Pilot.
the pilot, right?
yeah.
Can we first say the theme music?
Oh, it's
It's
great.
brilliant.
It's great.
Who wrote that? Do we
You
know?
know, it's Brian Jonestown Massacre, I think.
Really?
Yeah. I happen to.
And I always like it. It's
What?
one of those, it's very long. The open to that is very long. And I find myself listening to it. What I
Wait.
love about it is how much it does not match the time.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
So out of character for the era that we're dealing
Was
with.
that song written for the show?
It
I
was
believe it-
not.
it existed before, right?
It existed
Yeah, it
before,
existed
but do you
prior.
remember that old song? Must be the season of the witch.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
that was actually featured at the end of the Nicole Kidman one, To Die For. To Die
Yeah,
For?
yeah. To Die For.
Oh, yeah.
Every time I hear the Boardwalk Empire song, anyway, that's the song I think of because it kind of has the same progression. But anyway, I digress. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
So in watching these DVDs, and I'm a sucker for the commentaries. When I buy these things specifically for the
For the commentary.
commentary.
Yeah.
Right, you've already seen the show.
Yeah, right. So I just want to hear them talk about it. One of the things that jumps out at me is that everyone always talks about the opening scene and the bottles and the rolling
The
tide
water,
and whatever,
the tide.
and how some of that's CG and whatever. The next thing they talk about are Nucky's shoes.
Yeah.
Love 'em.
Buscemi gets stopped everywhere he goes and asked about the shoes and where to
Really?
find them, and people are now. Mike and I are obsessed with these shoes.
Yes.
I am. I mean, I
Totally.
need to own one of these pair, and I won't pay $600 for them.
What
But-
what kind are they?
They're like, I forget.
Are they
It's like
Ferragamos or something? What are they?
Fiorentini.
Fiorentini.
It's some sort of Italian maker.
Italian maker.
They're $600 plus a pair. I'm like, whoa.
I smell a birthday present.
I would.
Oh,
never.
Forzieri.
There you go.
Forzieri. And they're extremely $630. I mean,
All right.
Well, as my husband would say, you know,
two-tone
can't put a
wingtip
price on a
Oxfords.
good pair of shoes.
I will agree with him, but at $630,
No one's buying those shoes in my life.
Look,
Get out
you
of
know
here.
what? I'll tell you what.
They're fantastic.
When I get there, I will.
They're fantastic.
If I get there, I will definitely be. You know, I would definitely be. In
I
the
need to
market
enter a
for these.
contest somewhere where I win something. Or
I mean, look at these things.
They
You
are
people on the
good-looking
podcast
shoes.
can understand this,
That's
but
a
they're.
good-looking shoe. Does it say? Does it credit the show?
Well, you know what? I searched because I couldn't remember. I thought they were Fiorentinis too, but then I started thinking
Whatever,
that they
yeah.
weren't. But Forzieri and they're.
3 Irish people talking about some Italian name I don't know about.
And yeah, it's like me when I saw Justin
like
Timberlake in
Fugazi.
the black and white two-tone wingtips, and I'm like, oh, those look sharp, and I found out they were Christian Louboutins,
Ah,
$975 a pair. I was like, well,
Exactly.
maybe we'll wait.
all
Maybe
right.
we'll wait.
So that's what I heard from the Blu-rays over and over again was about
The shoes.
the opening scene, the credits and the shoes. The other thing before we get into it is that basically these, just like Gangs of New York, this series was based on a book.
Right.
The book is not some great work of fiction or whatever. I mean, it's like a historical take on how Atlantic City developed. I mean, the history of. I mean, like Gangs of New York, if you read it, and I read it, it's a historical account of how these gangs operated in New York. And there's none of course, I mean, no surprise, there's none of this character-driven stuff in the book. It's all about, like, here's how Atlantic City was formed, or one that we know today. I mean, it's amazing to me the amount of historical accuracy they have in the show currently.
It is, and actually that's one of the things that, I mean, listen, I'm from Chicago, so as soon as they start having Al Capone in there and the side story or parallel story of Cicero in Chicago, I'm immediately, of course, interested
you get drawn
in that.
in, right?
And I love that stuff. But it is interesting how you'll hear, you know, even what's his name, Lansky? Well, Lucky Luciano,
Meyer Lansky, and Lucky Luciano, Charlie Luciano.
Even Joe Torre. I mean, you know all those names. Yeah. You know all those names from real and obviously
Chicago Mafia history.
Well, one of the ways that I got into it, well before the show, when I started researching the book that I'm hoping to eventually write, is that I used to live off of Touhy Avenue in Skokie, and I looked it up just by chance, and John Touhy was a big gangster name back in the Prohibition days. I'm like, I didn't realize that. I thought it was just down in the heart of Chicago. It spread to
all over.
Cicero and Skokie and the South Side. And, I mean, it was all over the place.
I mean, to a great point, Dina's family, my wife's family, owns a bunch of property in northern Wisconsin, and there's a golf resort that Al Capone used to go up to hide out. I mean, the place is called the Four Seasons. It has been for 100 years or 90 years. And we all call it Capone's. That's where he would go and hide when the heat was on in Chicago. So
Four Seasons, Four Deuces.
I mean, I don't want to take this into like a crazy tangent here, but you know, it's just occurring to me as we're talking about this. I really didn't think this through before. When you think about Scorsese and you think about you know, his connection to Italian mafia movies, whether it's Goodfellas. And then obviously Gangs of New York, when you're talking more about an Irish mafia, although it's not really really Irish mafia. And then this, of course, it's really interesting to me how they are sort of
Casino.
Yeah, which might, you know, I guess he was Jewish in there.
Well, I mean, he was Jewish, Italian.
Right,
there was a little bit of Irish, but the Irish guy was the one who's got his head squeezed off.
Yeah, it's just interesting to
in
me.
the vice.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, the Irish guy takes the vice.
But that's actually, I mean, I don't even know why I'm bringing that up. It's just that, you know, in college I had written a thesis paper on The Godfather and you know, all the metaphors.
Where is that? I want to read it.
Oh, I'm sure I still have it somewhere.
See, I did Do the Right Thing. Spike Lee.
Another great movie. Another great movie.
I wrote a paper on that. And go.
No, I mean, what I love about it is that it does follow that historical. It does take the historical data. It, of course, is manipulating it, right? As only Scorsese can do.
But pretty true to the fact.
True to the fact, but by just, you know, like shifting things 5%, 10%, 15, 20% here or there, just making it a little bit different. I mean, the character Nucky Thompson, there was a guy, Nucky Johnson, who was the primary driver behind this era in Atlantic City history that drove a lot of this activity during the Prohibition time. So he's following the script. I mean, he's,
almost
based on true story.
In the show is a historical figure, except Jimmy, I think his mom, and
I think
Richard Harrow.
Richard Harrow is probably one of my favorite characters on the show.
Everybody else is like a real historical figure. I mean, for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I even wrote Richard Harrow on my notes just so that I mean, we certainly touch on it.
I heard because you know where writers will put a name, give a character a name where the first name or last name sort of gives a hint to their personality or their circumstance. Richard Harrow was Richard Harrower before, but they couldn't. They kept getting tripped up by the Harrower part in the name, so it became Harrow because they couldn't figure it out.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's interesting. So anyway, season 1, and we're going to go through every episode. We're not going to give it, not every episode, every season. We're not going to give
the highlights
the justice because, I mean, it's 12 episodes of dozens and dozens and dozens of characters and plot lines.
Plot lines, plot changes.
The basics for season 1 are the premiere opens at the eve of, or on the eve of Prohibition. We see all kinds of partying going on, and like the end of the current time of free drinking, I guess you want to call it, before the Volstead Act. Jimmy's back from World War I. He comes back to Nucky, and he's mad that he's not doesn't have any sort of status. He's got this injury, he fought for the country. We find out later why he went over there, but in season 2 or 3. But he's sort of pissed off, and he's just Nucky's driver. And then Margaret comes into the situation. Margaret is, and I'm going to argue, she might be one of the more demented characters in the show.
I would agree. I also find her to be frustrating because she vacillates so many times.
Right. She's the only one, I think the only one, maybe short of Richard Harrow, the only one who seems to have any sort of a moral compass.
Right.
And she throws it away at any whim.
Right, which is actually more upsetting than somebody who's pretty straight ahead about their morality.
Intensely despicable people in this show, and she might be the worst because of that.
Right, with the less integrity, let's say.
Yeah.
I would certainly argue that outside of very sideline characters on this show, there is not one character on the show with any redeeming qualities. I mean, it's a strong stance to take.
No, I don't know.
They all have some
thinking about it.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And I mean, of course, that makes for interesting, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't want to see normal suburban dad who goes to work at 9, comes home at 6, whatever.
I'll give you one. I mean, she's not a major character, but in the first season, she plays a role. First 2 seasons, I think. Maybe at best you say it's Jimmy's wife.
Yeah.
Yeah,
she's sort of an innocent.
Yeah, very innocently caught
at first,
up in
at
it.
least.
Right.
And
I mean, yeah,
but I do think the whole point of this is for every drama, right? Nucky, the show starts with him really having what is clear to be a lot of angst around his past and around his father.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, the season...
I'm getting psychological on this. That's very good.
No, and he ends up burning the house down. Talk about burn the mother now. But, I mean, and throughout everything that happens with Nucky, the truth is you are invested in him because you think this might be the time when he reveals his conscience, right? Every time, So when he ends up with Margaret, you think maybe this is going to be the thing that saves him. And I think he might even think it might be the same.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that he and Margaret are very similar. I mean, that constant wave of looking like you're going to do something that falls on the moral side, the proper side of the moral line, whatever that moral line might be, or the moral line for the time, and then he completely fails you.
Right.
And I think it's kind
they're
of a
the same. I think they're the same in this first season.
In the first season, at least, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Scorsese drives a lot of his characters like that. He has you on this roller coaster throughout. And it's the unique part for this is that it's not a Scorsese vehicle. It's not a movie. Right. It's not a 2.5-hour punch you in the gut, kill 75 people, and you walk out of the movie theater either laughing, crying, or smiling, whatever. It's more of a slow kill on Scorsese's part, right?
Exactly.
So he constantly burns you with, I'm gonna build this guy up right to the edge of where you're gonna really like him, and then he's gonna do something that absolutely fucking drains it.
It's people who are thinking they're doing the right thing, even when they do the wrong thing. Like they think they're just,
and that's the moral compass thing. Is that the bulk of these characters, or the protagonistic characters,
right?
None of them have that, right? So it's really just watching. You're like it's like being in a window watching these people
Exactly.
completely toy with other people's lives and their own lives in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
Well, I mean, everybody's trying to get over, right? And I mean, there's nothing new on that, but it is guised in these ebbs, the ebb and flow of this.
So Margaret comes in along these lines, and I mean, depending on where you are in the season, she comes in and she's got this abusive husband, Hans.
right,
Damn Germans every time.
Seriously,
you
what
go.
was she thinking?
Yeah. So she comes to Nucky for help, gets some money from him. He takes a liking to her immediately, and then various things happen, and eventually, effectively, Nucky has her husband killed.
Right.
And that doesn't stop her from immediately shacking up with Nucky and moving in and Nucky being her benefactor.
Right.
And she just wants the good life without any of the struggle to get there.
Well, I want to stop. As the only woman on this panel, I do want to say
Please.
there's a big difference between current day wanting the good life,
Of course.
and the circumstances that woman was in. So she needed a benefactor.
or the world she would have been in after her husband was dead.
Wow.
Which would have been hell.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit more severe there. She was really. I mean,
Right.
you could even take the tact, make a play for saying that she was trying to find a way to provide for her
Right.
children.
Absolutely.
And so I
Absolutely.
do actually think that was part of the appeal to Nucky, because again, he was going to find redemption in taking over these children and, providing this instant family, and boy, look what he did for her.
Yep.
So, however, he had to rationalize the murder, and really the murder was secondary to the fact that he needed Patsy to
Right.
take the blame for the
course.
situation. But he was able to justify all these things because he thought, in the end, the ends justified the means.
Yeah.
Well, what I love is the word you used in there was redemption,
Yeah.
right? And it seems like that's
like
a
that.
constant recurring theme throughout. Is it's like, and maybe that's what I was speaking of when I was
Right,
talking about
I
the
think
waves.
so.
Is like these characters are constantly looking for redemption, and they get right to it, and then they immediately claw themselves back down.
Right, it's something very Machiavellian about this.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's character development, and it's character driven, and I understand why it's done. It just makes for very gripping kind of
Yes.
roller coastery ride. I mean, I can't tell you the countless times that I've finished an episode of this and sat there with the TV on pause or off or just and started thinking back to what just happened in the 45,
So
50.
dense.
And because it's so, and sometimes I'd even go back and watch a second time so I could catch things that I was missing.
Yeah.
Just very, very compelling.
Now, we jumped ahead a little bit with Margaret, but so Nucky's got this girlfriend, Lucy,
Oh my God!
who is
that
a
shit
fucking
crazy.
train wreck.
Love her. She's nuts.
So he obviously, she's just there and whatever.
Right.
He's looking for something more, apparently. I mean, there's a scene in, I think, the first season where he's talking to whatever political bigwig he's talking to about issues, whatever, and Lucy tries to pipe up and be involved, and it's just a mess. And then that parallels a later scene where and they make fun in typical 20s fashion, like the women don't have a voice, they don't know what's happening in the world,
Right.
and blah blah blah, whatever. They're just disposable. Whereas when he meets, I think Margaret's bringing him something at the at the club, Babette's.
Babette's.
And thank you very much. And he's sort of
See, that's
about
the
to.
20s I want to be.
I know.
Totally.
About to usher her out. And then one of the guys he's talking to, one of the political allies he's talking to, makes a comment, I think, to Margaret. I think specifically designed to sort of trip her up. And then she comes back with a political answer that is actually well thought out and put together pretty well. And she shocks the hell out of all the guys and Nucky. And right there, you can see Nucky sort of
Yeah,
switch,
the
I want
light
to
goes
be
off.
with her.
Right.
Fuck this Lucy. She's out of control and she's a mess. This is the one I want to talk to. And
Well, there's some alluding to a past with Nucky, and there was
Right.
clearly at some point a wife and a child, I believe.
Yes.
And I don't know where we stand on that today, but
I think it's still a mystery.
Yeah, I think that's still buried.
Yeah.
well, I'm sure we're going to find out. But
That's got to be season 5, right?
Right,
It's
right.
got to come in play.
But I mean, obviously, there's that escapist, quality
Well, it's
to
like-
the girlfriend, and then they're saying, "Well, this might
Right.
work." But it's also, very strategic too. It could be good for his career if she's savvy enough
Right.
to help that situation.
There's
He
so
could be
many
an
ways
ally.
that
I mean,
that could be helpful.
Yeah, and it's also
Personally,
like
professionally.
it feeds into his ability to feel better about himself because of the good deed he's doing, and it feeds into
Well,
this
it's-
sort of pragmatic aspect.
Where he
of
was
how
sort of
he-
embarrassed to have Lucy by his side. Now he
course.
sees Margaret as someone who can be next to him and hold her own in these larger conversations.
right.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Love it.
All right. So, blah, blah, blah. We go through all kinds of stuff. The season goes on. One of the guys who shows up, who I think in the first first two seasons is vying for the creepiest character in the show, is Agent Van Alden.
I knew where you were going with
Fantastic.
Unbelievable.
Michael
job.
Shannon.
that. The guy
Chicago guy,
is
by the
a
way.
creepy dude.
He's
a
amazing.
Chicago guy, too.
Yes.
Amazing. So he's got this whole
Steppenwolf,
religious
right?
Yeah, he's a Steppenwolf.
Yeah.
fanaticalness to him with his wife, and you see his whole relationship. But he eventually spirals out of control. Not so much in this first season, but you see
Right.
sort of glimpses of his creepiness. I mean, Michael Shannon's amazing.
Unbelievable.
He is.
But every time I see him, not so much in this first season, but since then, I only think of that video of him with the sorority girl letter where he's talking about when he's reading that letter. And he throws out cunt punch.
Cunt
Or
punch.
Cunt punch.
Cunt punt.
I mean, when I go back and see these episodes,
now
I'm like,
I
oh my
didn't know
god,
that.
Van Alden said cunt punch.
Cunt punt. One of my absolute favorite points
the
about
greatest thing ever.
about Michael Shannon is that when Boardwalk Empire started, he was only 36 years old, and the character
36. He looked 46.
40 at least, more like 50 plus. He just plays that straight man so unbelievably well.
And it's brutal to watch. He looks so uncomfortable himself. That
Well, he
it
looks
makes-
like
Yeah.
he looks
That's
like a
the perfect
guy
word for
who
it.
is very uncomfortable in his own skin.
Yeah,
is what
clearly.
I found from the get go.
Yeah.
Who, again, without not necessarily lacking a moral compass, but lacking any kind of direction. Right? He was a guy who had no.
Well, he was
would-
clinging to religion as his his direction,
Right,
right?
right.
Yeah.
And
And
as,
his wife
as
can't
most
have
of
a
us at this
kid.
table know, we don't believe in clinging to religion for
Come on.
uh,
Well,
for the purpose of guiding your life. I mean, it's a good
all
thing
right,
to
that's
have,
another
but let's
podcast.
that's a whole nother podcast. Let's not go there.
Yeah.
But I just love this character
Oh, he is amazing.
for how he plays the character. The incessant awkwardness of the character.
Yes,
Or the righteousness that he has. Like,
yes.
I'm above everybody else, and
It's
you're
frightening.
doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong for these reasons. And then in his own life, he is a fucking mess.
Yeah.
And in an instant,
Yeah.
as here we go back.
He's
to
the ultimate hypocrite in this show.
The Scorsese characters go, as you think they're on the rise, doing the right thing, he immediately snaps.
Yeah.
And does,
Yeah.
and completely does a 180 on you, and he becomes, again, where all these characters are in Boardwalk Empire, becomes a villain, right?
And
He
I
becomes
actually
a
think you were
bad
Yeah,
onto
yeah.
something, Michael, when you were kind of going into the religion thing, which is to say, we made a statement that Nucky was somewhat using Margaret to feed his ego in terms of the good that he was doing to feed her. He's being righteous about religion at a certain point.
Totally,
And the judgment
yeah.
that he's doing, and that may be a way for him to mitigate the demons he has inside of him.
Exactly. Yeah.
But like,
Counterbalance, right?
it's a classic Scorsese move, like you were saying. And it's not just Van Alden, it's all these characters. As soon as they stand up, they cut their legs out.
Yeah,
they're
from
always
themselves,
falling
yeah.
down constantly, and it's amazing.
One thing that we haven't mentioned yet that I find to be one of my favorites is the introduction of Chalky
Chalky.
White.
Chalky, absolutely.
I was holding that off because he just might be my favorite character.
He might
I'm
be
not
mine
sure
too.
yet.
We could
He
probably
might be
spend.
mine,
We
too.
could probably do a whole podcast.
We'll come back to
But
it.
I actually
Yeah.
think the relationship between Nucky and Chalky is very similar to the one between Nucky and Margaret, which is to say,
Oh,
on the face of
that's
it,
interesting.
they seem, you think at first like maybe there's this brotherhood between them, right? There seems to be some modicum of loyalty or agreement, or at least brother in arms, and
Or are they just using each other?
they are clearly using each other.
Right.
And that I think you find out later down the road, especially in season 4, really. But I mean, it is interesting how they both seem to have this, which immediately, because of the circumstances, when you add the racial plot line to it, it sort of bolsters thinking, well, how brave Nucky is,
standing up to the KKK,
right, and all
and
this.
Chalky's name, and
But it is again so Machiavellian, so pragmatic, so
it's
so.
There's any number of reasons behind it, although on its face, like, it was unheard of. I mean, I have to imagine.
I would
It
think
wasn't-
that at the time it was
It was
unheard of.
fairly rare, if nothing else.
It
at
was
that
not
time.
a common thing, and
Right, but it wasn't
amazing.
also confined to the warehouse at Chalky's. He was, in the Ritz and everything else. So, I mean, it was
he was
fairly
everywhere.
open, in terms of, and then the fact that they had the nightclubs that were owned by the African Americans that were frequented by.
it was.
So this is one thing I want to come back to, because during season 1, Jimmy is frustrated. Nucky, and he's doing all kinds of stuff on behalf of Nucky, and it's not right. And Nucky says, "All right, get out of here. Just
Right.
get out of my face."
Yeah,
Really
get
key
lost.
to the
Go
story.
to Chicago.
Yeah, I go to Chicago, cool off. We'll get you back here eventually. It doesn't say that, but it's kind of implied. So in Chicago, Jimmy gets a girlfriend, apparently, some sort of prostitute in one of the Capone-run bars, or
Joe Torrio, I think.
Torrio.
Joe Torrio
It's a brothel.
facilities. Let's just call it that. A multi-purpose facility.
Multi-purpose facility.
Entertainment palace.
It's like an indoor batting cage place now.
Exactly.
Only
Exactly.
A Dave
different
and
bats.
Buster's.
Yeah, Dave and Buster's.
It is
With
different
equipment.
Busters. All kinds of games for everybody.
Yeah.
There's alcohol. It's great.
Chicago hasn't changed that.
No. So her name is Pearl, and there's a whole thing there. But one thing I wanted to point out is that, and this comes out in the Blu-ray commentary, is that the one scene where I forget who, whatever gangsters, I can't follow. There's too many characters.
I know, right?
They want to stick it to Jimmy in some way. They want to send a message to Jimmy.
Right.
So they're going to hurt his girlfriend,
Right.
Pearl.
Yeah.
And they grab her. They go up there and they grab her by the throat and they slice her face.
Yeah.
From like the top of the corner of one part of her forehead down across her eyes, down to her face, other way. So that's essentially the exact same scar that Michael K. Williams, Chalky White, has in real life.
Is that right?
He had a scar. He said he cannot watch that scene, and still to this day hasn't watched it because it's so reminiscent of what happened to him.
Oh my God.
He was in a bar fight however long ago.
Got cut off.
A friend of his was about to get his ass kicked. He got involved to try and stop it. Before anything really started, a guy had a box cutter of some sort
Oh, my
and
God.
slashed him.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
slashed him across the face, so he can't watch it. So, and this is the guy who's been in The Wire and whatever else. I mean,
Right, and he's a very handsome guy, yeah.
good-looking guy, a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
In a million things, but he's like, I can't watch that scene. It's like, it's disturbing because that's what happened to me.
Ugh.
The same cut, and it was coincidence.
Did they do that by?
No,
It was total
it was
coincidence.
coincidence.
Okay.
The director didn't realize it, and it was a whole thing.
Ugh.
But
I
yeah.
never really did quite understand what the point of that was, and then she later died.
They were trying to hurt
Yeah.
Jimmy and send him away with a message, basically. I mean, that's just brutal gangster stuff, I
I
guess.
guess.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
All right, so we're like halfway through season
I
1.
know.
Let's get.
I
We've
think-
got to
Yeah.
talk. But
I mean, the bottom line is that the whole plot line was really about Jimmy going to Chicago so that those connections could be made, and that's really what's furthering the story is the Al Capones with the Joe Torrios, and then, of course, always with New York with Rothstein and his crew.
And one thing we need to touch on before we go on is the character of Arnold Rothstein.
Oh, my God. That actor is phenomenal.
Absolutely unbelievably good.
Amazing.
And
the vocal cadence.
True to form to what Rothstein sounded like at the time.
Is that
according
right?
to all historical data, is that is the kind of the cadence he talked in. He was very proper. He was very...
Yeah, the guy was really...
could not stand it when people would curse.
So apparently the actor Michael Stuhlbarg, or Stuhlbarg, has... he was doing, before Boardwalk Empire, he was doing a play with the guy who ended up playing Eli.
Oh.
Nucky's...
God, we haven't even talked about it.
Nucky's brother.
We haven't talked about...
We're trying to wrap up a whole season.
I know, we really went too long.
But, I think we're doing...
So,
I think
anyway,
we're doing good.
those two guys worked in a play. When they were hired for Boardwalk Empire, neither knew the other one had been hired until they showed up on set the same day.
Oh.
Wow, interesting.
But the Rothstein guy, he was so well researched that the directors would say, do this or do that. And he would say, no, I think Rothstein would do this because of, and he would spout 5 reasons why this guy would do this a certain way. He knew the character so well.
Absolutely. I think, we in some of our notes we talk about creepiest characters, and Arnold Rothstein, I think, was just genuinely a creepy guy who was always about how he could fix things and how he could,
What's he most famous for?
Well, he's most famous for fixing
Series.
my team's World Series.
Right.
And
Also,
1919.
I'd like to think that I have a little personal connection to that as well.
You do.
Doc Graham.
Doc Graham.
Moonlight Graham.
Explain that, please. What are you
Oh,
talking
you don't
about?
know that story?
I don't know your story.
Oh, this is a great story.
It's a great story. My dad is from Chisholm, Minnesota.
Yeah.
And in Chisholm, they had a school doctor for all the kids in the school. And the school doctor was Doc Graham. He had suffered this blow to his reputation after being involved. He played baseball and was sent up to the range. Take care
Played
of
baseball with who?
He was on the White Sox.
The 1919
Black
White
Sox
Sox.
team, yep.
Yeah. Who Rothstein famously... Did he actually fix the
World
White
Series.
Sox?
He did, yeah.
He fixed it.
All right.
He definitely did, without question. Those guys were not making a lot of money back then, and it was too easy to buy them off, and he offset what he was paying them with what he was gambling against them on.
Well, that's the interesting part about the guy is that he is so composed and he is so proper, but he has clearly got a compulsion.
Oh my God, unbelievable!
Around gambling that
a
he
gambling addiction.
Cannot. I mean, yes.
It's not. It's beyond even addiction.
It is beyond addiction.
It's who he is.
Right.
It is really just he's just compelled.
Yeah, I mean, everything that drives him involves gambling.
Yeah.
And really, everything that drives him is around fixing gambling. It's not even about the gamble.
Right.
It's about making the odds
work
so far in your favor that it's not worth not doing it. So
And
it ceases to become gambling.
That comes back
that's
to
a really
haunt
good
him
point. Talk about
in
fixing it. Oh.
season 3, I think, when he's gambling in Nucky's place and he fixes
keeps
the
winning.
game, and it's a whole issue.
Yeah,
But,
that's definitely an interesting point. And before we jump ahead, I just want to throw one more character out there that we haven't even touched on yet. But the Commodore, played by the...
I wanted my love, Dabney
Coleman in an epic kind of...
swan song of a career.
I mean, he's a guy who has been extremely prolific in almost a secondhand kind of a way throughout his career.
Yeah.
He's been in countless dozens of movies.
He
always does a phenomenal job. He always plays somewhat of a foil. I mean,
he does, and he's always very, very true to...
Yeah,
he's believable in everything he does.
He's believable, and he displays no interest in being liked. Right?
No,
he just
none.
Wants to
Absolutely
do
none.
What is asked of the character.
And the Commodore to me is probably the most despicable character from season 1.
So we learn that. The Commodore is sort of a background character, not really there until the final couple
3 or 4
episodes.
2 or 3 episodes, right?
And we find out that before the bad stuff. This is the light stuff.
Yeah,
the Commodore was involved with Nucky on an election fixing scam, and the Commodore went to jail for it, effectively taking the fall for Nucky.
Right.
And when the Commodore got out, Nucky had taken the Commodore's place as the guy
in Atlantic City. Right.
And the Commodore's pissed about this. He wants to be back in the game, but he's not. The bad part that we find is the Commodore basically employed Nucky to do his bidding, do whatever. And one of the things he did is Nucky found Jillian on the boardwalk or somewhere, brought 13-year-old Jillian to the Commodore as his offering. That's a great word.
Only way to put it.
And Jimmy was conceived.
Jillian gets pregnant at 13 or whatever, hence she's so young in the show compared to Jimmy. And Jimmy is Commodore's son.
Gretchen.
And that relationship is revealed at the end of the show.
Right. I think it's the last episode.
And Gretchen Mallin, a tour de force,
she
by the way.
is phenomenal.
So I don't know, before this...
She should win an award.
Before this series, I didn't know her for anything except for Rounders.
Right.
She was Matt Damon's girlfriend in Rounders.
Great in Rounders, too.
Of course.
Great movie.
Yeah, I never really had any affinity, but this is the role of a lifetime.
She's
for her.
in the running for creepiest character too.
Oh my god, absolutely! I mean, the second season is when she gets really creepy, but
right.
Sorry, Michael.
The beauty of the Scorsese vehicle is that everybody's in the running for creepy.
Exactly.
It's not whether or not you're in the running; it's whether or not or how long you're in.
Right.
You know how far deep you are into the running.
Right.
So, I mean, at the end, we have the situation where Eli, the Commodore, and Jimmy are all fixing gang up on Nucky, and Eli has been shot at some point with all the mob stuff that's been going on. So when we're really, really waiting to see what's going to happen, and Jimmy's poised to, the season ends with Jimmy poised to be a central character again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, all right. So that's effectively season 1.
It is.
Yeah.
All right. One of the things I want to talk about, and this is backtracking a little bit, but sort of it can continue beyond season 1, is this. When this season started, the first season when the series started, was the first time I had heard the name Tim Van Patten in probably 20 years.
From the White Shadow?
From the White Shadow.
But the Van
he directs everything.
The Van Pattens direct everything.
Yeah.
I was not into The Sopranos. I never...
Really?
It passed me by.
They are epic.
Right.
Not only a directing
get
family...
that on Blu-ray, my friend.
I know,
but a tennis-playing family.
That's right. Remember the 1970s Battle of the Network Stars?
Oh, my God.
Dick Van Patten was this patriarch of this tennis-playing movie and TV directing
most
crew.
Beloved father of the 70s.
You know, I mean, 8 is
Oh, my
enough,
God.
right?
Are you kidding?
Have we talked enough about Tim Van Patten?
No, we haven't.
Actually, no.
Tim Van Patten.
He does deserve it, too.
Well, he's a fantastic director.
I want to at least touch on my relationship to Tim Van Patten for a second.
There's a relationship. Interesting.
There's a relationship.
So the summer between 8th grade and freshman year in high school, getting ready for football.
Okay.
Drinking my Joe Weider weight gainer shakes, trying to get from 120 pounds to 130
What'd you say,
pounds.
8th grade and freshman?
Yeah.
Were you in Dallas?
I would have been in California on my way to Dallas.
On your way to Dallas.
So
Robbie the Robot.
All right. Every day during the week, we'd go to the beach or whatever. But before football practice, I would in California, I would sit down and watch an episode or 2 or 3 of The White Shadow. It was a marathon on every afternoon.
Nice.
Tim Van Patten, Salami, the greatest white player on TV at that point. Was amazing. It was amazing. So,
you learned a lot of life lessons too from the coach. Right?
Well, so here's my connection. Not so much Salami, Van Patten, was Ken Howard, the coach,
30
the
Rock.
White Shadow.
The White Shadow,
Yes,
yeah.
he was the White Shadow.
My dad, I believe, played against him a couple times.
Oh, at Notre Dame?
No, in upstate New York high school basketball.
They are a New York family.
But he may have played him here or there or whatever, but more importantly, they went to some sort of I don't know if it was a junior high or high school leadership camp of some sort, like a student government type of a thing for a weekend or a week or whatever. And they were like, I don't know if it was roommates or they were friends in
Good
this
job
sort
on
of...
getting the facts to the story, by the way.
Listen, I'm too old for facts at this point. It's fast and loose. Let's go. So he knew him fairly well from this like leadership camp, not so much the basketball stuff. He went on to. I mean, my dad played in college, and this guy played in college, and so yeah, my connection
And
to
he
the White
also
Shadow.
became the owner of Cabletown.
He did.
Cabletown.
And my dad worked at Comcast. It all sort of
I know,
comes
what's
together.
up,
Cabletown.
dummies? All right.
Well, I mean,
All
to
right.
give him his due, though, he has
he's a
been an
tremendous
extremely
actor.
prolific director.
Tim Van
Extremely,
Patten.
Tim Van Patten.
Van
Yeah.
What is
He's-
some of the other stuff he's done?
Well, I mean, he has directed everything from episodes of the show Ed, which was on a long
Oh,
time
it's
ago.
a good
yeah.
The
show.
Wire, which was
Right.
by far
I think that's
one of
where
the
his
best shows
connection to
ever.
Boardwalk came in.
Multiple, countless episodes of The Sopranos, Deadwood. Remember Deadwood, which was a
I do
great
remember. I
vehicle
did
on
watch
the
that.
Gold Rush era. The Gold Rush era in the late 1800s, early
Yeah,
1900s. Just has a Game of Thrones. He's directed episodes of Game of Thrones. I mean, this guy is, they're an interesting family in that they have a lot going on there, and you kind of hear their names or you see them on the screen as it's kind of flying by.
Yeah.
It's the Penny Marshall thing, right? Everyone
Right.
thinks of her as Laverne. Everyone thinks of Van
Yeah.
Patten's as 8 is enough. Well, there's a little bit more to it than that, right? There's some depth there.
He didn't direct all the episodes, but
Not all, but a
bunch
healthy
of them,
amount,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
So-
same thing with The Sopranos. He
I thought
didn't
it was
direct. He
interesting.
didn't direct all of those.
Yeah.
And Scorsese's good about moving people around. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I want this to go in a different direction.
But he's got a core group of, I don't know,
Well,
3
yeah,
or 4
I mean,
directors. They sort of rotate.
they
and it's-
rotate around, but it
Each
gives
episode's got its little tweak. you
Yeah,
know?
and it gives it the nice twist where really when you get to it on a Sunday night when it's in season, you don't know what's going to happen, right?
I
mean,
do
you don't
think
know where
on a
it's going.
weekly show, though, like this, like The Sopranos, like all the great HBO shows, the writers tend to take more responsibility
Without question.
than a director.
But the directors can definitely tinge it. They can
Absolutely.
make it. They can make something seem different than another director might,
Absolutely.
or bathe it in a different light. And that's what I really like about the show is that week to week you might get an episode that's I don't want to say flat because it's not the right word, but
Right.
you might get an episode that's more
Dynamic.
Yeah, right. You might get this more flow of personal information or
Some
more
of them
flow
are-
of like the setup
Yep.
is that all right. This week's episode is a total setup episode.
Some
Next
episodes
week,
just get you from A to B, right?
a bunch of motherfuckers
Yeah.
are going to die next week. I mean, there have been episodes of this where I've gone, oh my god, next week's going to be a massive bloodbath. And
okay.
They always come through us.
So when we get to season 3, that's the bloodbath.
Right.
Oh.
My one thing I want to talk about season 1, and we'll cut this off and go to season 2. But season 1, the sort of overarching thread or the theme, even going into it, is that, and it's sort of I think Jimmy tells Nucky this to his face: is you can't be half a gangster.
Yeah.
And that's what Nucky's trying to be the entire episode.
Right.
Half politician, half gangster. Where does he lie? It's sort of you're not sure where he's at. The second episode the second season continues that a little bit. By the third episode, he's 100% gangster.
Right.
And,
Well-
and we'll get there eventually. But
yeah. Oh, he's getting there.
Season 2 is almost that linking episode in between season 1 and season 3.
Right.
Well, he's really tested in season 2, right? I mean, between getting arrested, going to trial, having been shot, left for dead.
A lot going on there.
All right, let's pause it. I have to go to the bathroom.
Okay, take a break, pause. I've got to set
Take a break.
Brendan O'Neill's guest network. Are you going to be tracking everything?
Okay. Hello. All right, it's good. It's working. All right. Before we start season 2, So I was watching the DVDs as usual my past couple weeks here. You have little kids, Michelle, so a little kid. You should make sure they see this or he sees this. Yours are too old, probably mine are way too old. Sesame Street.
Yes.
Did a Boardwalk Empire inspired scene.
Really?
A whole segment.
They do some great
called Boardwalk Empire. Right? One of the characters is called Nucky Clucky or something to that effect. They're all birds. One group is ducks. One group is chickens. It's amazing and it's terrible, but it's kid stuff. And
where was the racism heavily laid, on the ducks or on the?
I'm thinking the chickens.
The chickens.
The misogyny.
The ducks were racist toward the
racism.
chickens.
That's a point we haven't even touched on, is the misogyny in the entire show. It's just
it's the 20s.
A given for the time.
It doesn't. I think it's just part of the backstory, but it is something that's very interesting to me. The way there's a lot of casting off of women and women being treated in a misogynistic fashion. It's just another note that it's a completely different era.
Well, I mean that's sort of
that and the shoes.
Exactly. That's tied into. I think the whole Margaret thing is that she's the one woman, maybe in the entire series, who has a brain. The rest of them are not involved.
She's the smartest one of the lot, without question.
Short of Jillian.
Jillian,
right?
maybe. Jillian is very smart and very calculating.
Genius.
Yeah.
Calculating. That doesn't play out well for her long run because she plays too many.
Listen, she's such a sad sack.
Without question. I mean, she's a compelling character
she's
because
disturbed.
She's so disturbed and she's so amoralistic, yet she has that whole backstory that makes it real, right? It doesn't make it real enough for me to make me that sympathetic for her.
Yeah.
But it makes it real.
Yeah.
How's that?
Definitely.
You are a product of your environment.
Absolutely.
Which is why you turned out the way you did.
Oh, my parents had a lot of
Mr.
explaining
O'Neill.
to do. Okay, there's two things that I want to point out.
Texas.
There are. That's why I don't live there. There's a number of things, like weird things that, not weird, but unique things that come up throughout the series. I'll point out two, but there's probably a dozen of these different things throughout different episodes. And this may be back to episode 1 or season 1 or season 2, I'm not sure. But things like, they're early on, I think it's Nucky, or at least it's Mickey Doyle, and it's Chalky, and it's whoever, random characters. And they're loading boxes of whiskey onto trucks or whatever it is. They're processing that week's take of whatever it is. At some point, Chalky says, something like, I'm going to kill those motherfuckers, or this is a motherfucker. And then he walks away. And then the other white character is like, motherfucker? What's a motherfucker? As if no one had ever heard that term. And in this little world,
maybe no one had.
Effectively, Chalky White invented the term motherfucker. In that episode.
Credit.
Which I found hilarious.
Chalky White.
I was laughing my ass off. Like, yeah, that had to come from somewhere. Maybe it was the 20s. Maybe I don't know.
I don't think it was. If it was before that, it wasn't much before that.
Right. So I thought,
that's a
little
more modern lexicon, right? I mean, that's not,
It's not a big thing, but I caught that that's very interesting. Like, Chalky White.
Not exactly Garden of Eden speak.
In this world, he
might have
introduced it.
Right, I love that.
The other one, and there's a number of these things, sort of historical references for idioms or phrases or common speak that you'll hear today when you don't know anything about it. But back then, it had a reason or a cause.
Right.
One of those was the real McCoy.
Oh.
And you see this, I think it's season 1. One of the rum runners on the boats who would get alcohol from the Bahamas and bring it into the eastern seaboard was William McCoy.
Ah.
And he was known as, he was not a drinker. He was not a lawbreaker. He was sort of an honest criminal. And when Nucky or whoever, and I think in this case Nucky and his team are receiving shipments from Bill McCoy. He is the source of the phrase, the real McCoy. If you got stuff from him, you know it wasn't diluted and it wasn't gut rot whiskey. It was the real stuff. So hence the real McCoy is now out there. But if you watch the first, say 3 or 4, there's only 4 seasons, but say 3 seasons, there's like one of those in almost every season that comes out like, oh, I didn't realize that's the source of that.
Right.
So,
right.
Those undoubtedly.
The 20s were a great time. I mean, it introduced a lot of different things to the United States, and it really was an epic time of change in this country.
Well,
beyond, and this is expanding and breaking out from the show, but it just people changed the way they were from the teens to the 20s very rapidly, and accelerated that through the end of the 20s. And then it kind of fell off in the 30s, and everything went back to that. What became
was the Great War, right?
Right. I mean, it became the norm, like that. The holistic, the mom, the dad, the white picket fence, you had
the First War, and then you had all these people saying, hell, we may die tomorrow. It's the Great War. This is as bad as it's ever going to get. And you had this sort of exuberance about what's next. And I do think, as crazy as it sounds, Prohibition was a function of good intentions, right? You had a lot of people with a lot of drinking problems.
The road to hell was paved.
No, and the truth is the women wanted to vote, and that's how they got it done.
The temperance movement?
Right. The temperance movement was satisfied by getting the vote.
Suffrage, right? I mean, and
exactly.
It's like, and can one be tied to the other? I don't know that you can clearly.
Of course.
I don't know that you can clearly tie the two together.
I think that Nucky the show did a great job.
Well, the show
did
show that.
Yeah.
But what's real and what's...
There's no doubt that the motivation for Prohibition was basically that these women had a bunch of problems with a bunch of drunk husbands. And they figured if they could get the stuff outlawed, that their lives would improve. And the politicians came in and said, we'll do this for you, but you better vote our way. And that's the way it worked out.
It was a changing in...
under the guise of progress.
Yeah, but, I mean, holding off some of the,
Cynicism?
larger cultural implications, it was effectively a legislative change in the diet of the Americans. When they came over 200 years prior, 150 years prior, so much of the liquid they consumed was alcoholic.
Right.
For safety reasons.
Was pickled,
right? I think that lasted for a long, long time. Even kids would have, there was a name for it, but a lesser alcoholic beer.
Yeah.
And I think that continued for a long time. Near beer. Perfect. And I think, pick the date, 18-something, it became where people were just getting drunk, and it became out of control. And that continued, and I think it was years and years of women, fed up with this bullshit, and then the temperance movement kind of came into vogue, into being, and forcing the hand of politicians to, all right,
yeah, but
these guys are fucking idiots. We got to get them off the street.
That's true.
People are falling
but
down.
Women had absolutely no standing and no power. The only way the
temperance
movement moves up is when the men see it beneficial to them.
Of course.
And the only way men see the temperance movement is beneficial to them is by getting a voting public to black behind them. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. Yep. And they politicize that as much as anything else. So... clearly, the rules weren't enforced.
Clearly. Sorry for the abrupt end of the show, but for the first few episodes where we recap each season, we recorded them all in one sitting and needed to break up the discussion into consumable, bite-sized pieces centered around each season. Thank you for listening to the Boardwalk Breakdown podcast, and follow us on Twitter @BoardwalkBreak. Future episodes of this podcast will focus on a single episode of Boardwalk Empire.